Hi, just confirming that your invitation to Daniel and Emma's wedding has been cancelled. Sorry for the confusion. That was it. No explanation. No emotion. Just a line that made my heart stop for a second. I reread it 3 times, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something that made sense. It didn't. I actually laughed when I first saw it, the kind of half-choked, confused laugh you let out when your brain can't process something. Because, come on, how could my invitation be cancelled? I'm his sister. His only sister. I was there when he met Emma. I remember the night he came home from that first date, all smiles and nerves, saying, "I think I just met the one." I was the one who helped him pick the ring. I even stood in the kitchen with him for hours, rehearsing the proposal speech he could barely get through without stuttering. So yeah, the text didn't make sense. I tried calling Daniel right away, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again, nothing. I sent a text. "Hey, just got a weird message from your planner. Something about my invite being cancelled. Please tell me this is a mistake." He read it. I saw the little, read 9:42 a.m. pop up under my message. But he didn't reply. That silence felt louder than anything he could have said. All morning, I kept pacing my living room, phone in hand, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was some clerical error. Maybe the planner mixed up names. I mean, big weddings get messy, right? Guest lists change, emails get crossed. That's what I kept telling myself. By noon, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided to call the planner directly, a woman named Madeline I'd met once before when I helped Emma choose table linens. She was sweet, professional. Until that call. The moment she heard my voice, her tone shifted, polite, but distant. "Hi, Madeline, this is Ava, Daniel's sister. I just got a message saying my invitation was cancelled." There was this pause. Not a technical one, an awkward one. The kind where you can almost feel the person on the other end trying to decide how much truth they're allowed to share. Finally, she said softly, "Yes. That's correct. I was told to notify you. The guest list changed last week." "Okay, but who told you to remove me?" Another pause. Then she sighed. "It was confirmed by the couple." I froze. The couple. Meaning Daniel and Emma. I wanted to ask again, to push back, but I could hear her discomfort. She was just doing her job. So I thanked her, out of habit, I guess, and hung up. The second I did, I just sat there, staring at my phone, feeling this dull heaviness spread through me. I felt erased. That's the only word for it. Like someone had quietly decided I no longer belonged. By the afternoon, my confusion turned into something darker. Anger, disbelief, hurt, it all blended into this storm inside me. I kept replaying memories in my head. Daniel and I, as kids, built forts out of couch cushions. He was sneaking extra fries onto my plate when our mom wasn't looking. The night I drove across town at 2 a.m. because he'd had a fight with Emma and didn't want to be alone. How do you go from that to being cut out of his wedding guest list like a stranger? I grabbed my keys and drove to his place without even thinking. His car was parked outside, lights off. I knocked on the door, no answer. Knocked again. Nothing. I waited. A full 10 minutes. I could hear faint movement inside, like footsteps, maybe a door closing. But no one came out. "Daniel," I called softly, my voice cracking. "Please just talk to me." Silence. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stood there on his porch, clutching my phone, trying not to cry. I wasn't angry in that moment, I was scared. Scared of what this silence meant. Eventually, I walked back to my car. It was cold outside, and the sky had that heavy gray tint it gets before rain. I sat behind the wheel, staring at his house, my reflection faintly visible in the windshield. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, he wouldn't do this to me. Not unless there's a reason. But what reason could possibly justify this? I went home that night and sat on the couch in the dark, scrolling through old photos on my phone, Daniel and me at the lake, Daniel and Emma at their engagement dinner, all smiles. In every single one, I could see love. Family. Trust. And yet now, I couldn't shake the thought that something had shifted, something I hadn't seen coming. When my phone buzzed again around 11 p.m., my heart jumped. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Emma. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the message made my blood run cold. You deserve to know why he did it. I stared at that text for a long time, reading it over and over until the words blurred. The number wasn't saved in my phone. Area code, same as Daniel's city. No name, no clue who it was. Just that one sentence, sitting there like a spark in the dark. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I typed back instantly. Who is this? The 3 dots popped up, typing, then stopped. Then started again. Then stopped. For a full minute, nothing. I was about to give up when another text appeared. You didn't do anything wrong. He's protecting someone. I froze. Protecting someone. My stomach tightened. My mind raced through every possibility. Emma. Their parents. Someone from his job. Nothing made sense. Protecting who? I typed. No response. Just silence. The typing bubble appeared again for a few seconds, then vanished completely. I sat there in my living room, lights off, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and the faint hum of the fridge. It was one of those moments where time slows down, when your world is still but your mind is spinning so fast it's hard to breathe. If Daniel was protecting someone, that meant something bad had happened. Something serious enough to erase me from his wedding, to avoid me entirely. And then it hit me. Emma. We had never been close, not in a dramatic, we hate each other, kind of way, but there was always this strange distance between us. She was polite, always smiling, but sometimes I'd catch her giving me that look. You know the one, like she was trying to figure out if I was a threat, or just someone she needed to tolerate. I brushed it off as personality differences. She was quiet, reserved, perfectionist about everything. I was the opposite, loud, emotional, maybe too involved. But Daniel always said, you'll love her one day, you just need time. Now, sitting there with that cryptic message on my phone, I couldn't help but wonder, was she the one he was protecting? And from what? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, the way he used to smile when he talked about me, how proud he looked when I graduated, how he once said, no matter what, you're my person, Ava. And now he couldn't even answer a text. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to sit around wondering. I was going to find out. I took the day off work, drove back to his neighborhood, and parked a block away from his house. I know how that sounds, obsessive, maybe even desperate, but when your own brother cuts you out of his life without explanation, you stop caring about appearances. Around noon, I saw Emma's car pull into the driveway. She got out, phone in hand, looking like she hadn't slept either. I watched as she stood there for a few seconds, head down, then walked toward the side gate instead of the front door. That was odd. The side gate led to the backyard, Daniel's workshop, where he used to fix up old motorcycles. He'd built that shed himself years ago. Something in me just said go. So I got out of my car, heart hammering, and started walking down the street like I just happened to be passing by. When I reached the house, Emma had already disappeared behind the gate. I paused, trying to decide if I should knock or call out. But before I could, I heard voices. Daniel's. Low, tense. Then Emma's, sharp, like she was fighting back tears. I couldn't make out everything, but I caught fragments. She's going to find out eventually. No, she won't. We can't risk that. Daniel, she's your sister. You can't just. I said enough, Emma. My blood ran cold. That wasn't the voice of a man trying to protect someone. That was guilt. Fear. And something else, desperation. I wanted to storm in right then, demand answers, but something told me to stay still. I could hear footsteps moving closer to the fence. I ducked behind the hedge as the side gate creaked open. Emma stepped out, wiping her eyes, muttering something under her breath. She looked broken. Like someone who'd been carrying a secret for too long. I watched her walk to her car and drive away, her taillights vanishing down the street. Then I stood there for a full minute, staring at that closed gate, knowing that whatever was behind it, behind him, wasn't simple. When I finally walked up and knocked, there was no hesitation this time. I didn't care if he was mad. I didn't care if he slammed the door in my face. He opened it after a few seconds, eyes tired, jaw clenched. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Ava, he said quietly, surprised but not shocked. You shouldn't be here. I just stared at him. Then tell me why, Daniel. Tell me why your planner canceled my invitation. Why you've been ignoring me. Why I'm standing here like some stranger at your door. He looked away, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it, I said, my voice breaking. He sighed, long, heavy, defeated. For a second, he looked like he wanted to tell me everything. Then he whispered, it's not what you think. Then what is it? He hesitated. His eyes met mine for a split second, full of something that looked a lot like regret. And then, softly, almost like he was confessing to himself, he said, I didn't want to hurt you. But you shouldn't have found out this way. I felt the ground shift under me. Found out what? He didn't answer right away. He just stared past me, at the empty street, as if the words he was about to say were too heavy to pull out. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. It's about Mom. Those 3 words hung in the air like a crack in the world. I froze. My mind raced through every possible meaning, but none of them fit. My mom had been gone for almost 5 years. A sudden heart attack. Peaceful, they said. Quick. We mourned her, buried her, and tried to move forward. What could Daniel possibly mean now? I stepped closer, searching his face for something, anything. What about Mom? He hesitated, glancing past me like he was making sure no one was around. Then he quietly said, you should come inside. The air in his house felt heavy the moment I walked in. The blinds were half drawn, dishes piled in the sink, papers scattered on the counter. Daniel had always been neat, obsessively so. But now everything looked neglected. Like he'd been living inside his own storm. He motioned for me to sit, then poured himself a glass of water. His hands were shaking. I could hear the faint clink of the glass against the counter. Finally, he sat down across from me and said, you remember how Mom used to volunteer at St. Andrew's shelter, right? I nodded. Yeah, she was there almost every weekend. She didn't just volunteer there, he said slowly. She met someone. I frowned. Okay. He looked up at me, his eyes raw and hollow. A man, Ava. She met a man. And it wasn't just some passing friendship. It took a moment for that to sink in. Wait, you're saying she was having an affair? Daniel nodded, guilt washing over his face. I found out 6 months before she died. I walked in on them arguing in her car outside the shelter. She begged me not to tell Dad. My chest tightened. You never said anything. I couldn't, he whispered. She said she'd end it. She promised. But the thing is, she didn't. They were still in contact. I found out later, there was more. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. More what? Daniel rubbed his face, like he was trying to wake himself up from a nightmare. The man's name was Richard, he was married too. His wife found out after Mom passed. She reached out to me about a year later. She said Mom had left behind letters. And in one of them, he stopped. His throat tightened. In one of them, she mentioned something that would change everything. Something she never told Dad. Something she said was for me to know, when the time was right. I stared at him. My heartbeat was so loud it felt like it echoed in my chest. Did you read it? He nodded. Yeah. And that's why I didn't want you at the wedding. It felt like the ground slipped under me. What does any of this have to do with me, Daniel? He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. Because it's not just about Mom. It's about who we are. My breath caught. What are you talking about? He stood up suddenly, pacing the room. I shouldn't have said anything. I thought I could protect you from it, from him. But after she died, Richard tried to reach out again. First to me. Then, last month, to Emma. I blinked. Wait, Emma. How does she even know him? Daniel's jaw clenched. Because he showed up at her office. Said he had something to give her, a file that belonged to Mom. He knew her name. Her job. Her address. He said you were supposed to get it too. My head spun. What? I don't even know this man. Daniel slammed his fist lightly against the counter, not in anger, in pure helplessness. I know. That's why I canceled your invite. Because if you showed up, he would have found you there. I stared at him, trying to breathe. Every part of me wanted to scream that this was insane. That it didn't make sense. But something in Daniel's face told me he believed every word. What's in the file? I asked finally. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair again. Mom's will. And something else. Something she wrote after she was diagnosed, something she didn't want Dad to see. She mentioned a name. My voice trembled. What name? He looked at me for a long, heavy moment, and then whispered, almost afraid to let it out. Yours. I felt the air leave my lungs. Mine? Why would she? Because she said she had to explain the truth to you, he cut in. But I couldn't let him, or anyone, use that to hurt you. So I told Emma we were cutting contact until after the wedding. I told the planner to cancel your invite because he already knew you'd be there. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer. I wanted to believe he was just paranoid. That grief had warped something inside him. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of haunted sincerity, that made it impossible to dismiss. I leaned back slowly, whispering, Daniel, what truth? He hesitated, his lips trembling. Mom wrote that the man she met at the shelter wasn't just someone she helped. He was family. I blinked. Family? His voice cracked as he said it. She said he was our uncle. But not the one we grew up with. The one Dad never talked about. I felt my entire body go cold. Uncle Richard. The man who vanished when we were kids. The one Dad always called a mistake. Everything suddenly connected in flashes. Dad's cold silence whenever Mom mentioned her weekends at the shelter, the locked drawer in her study, the way Daniel's voice used to tighten whenever someone brought up our family history. Daniel sank back into his chair, exhausted. She was meeting him because she found out something about our family. Something about you, Ava. My mouth went dry. Me? He nodded slowly. And if he's still looking for you, that means you were never supposed to find out. He looked down, his voice breaking on the last words. And now it might be too late. I didn't even realize I was shaking until Daniel reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His fingers were cold. We sat there in silence for a long time, two grown adults suddenly reduced to frightened kids in our mother's kitchen. Finally, he whispered, "I kept it. The letter." I couldn't read it again, but I couldn't throw it away either. He stood, walked to a drawer by the fridge, and pulled out a small manila envelope. The edges were worn, the flap resealed with yellowed tape. My name was written on the front in my mother's neat cursive, "For Ava, when you're ready." I didn't feel ready. Not even close. But I nodded, and Daniel slid it across the table. The paper inside smelled faintly of lavender, Mom's favorite soap. Her handwriting slanted a little to the right, just like it always did on birthday cards. For a moment, my chest ached with something simple and pure: I missed her. Then I started reading. My sweet girl. If you're reading this, I'm no longer there to explain it in person, and that's the part that breaks me the most. You grew up believing that love and truth are the same thing, but they aren't, not always. Sometimes we hide the truth because love asks us to. I stopped reading for a second, swallowing hard. Daniel looked away, eyes wet. I kept going. Before you were born, your father and I went through something that changed us. We wanted children so badly, but after years of trying, the doctors told us we couldn't. Then a miracle happened, or at least that's what we told everyone. The truth is, you were a miracle, Ava, just not in the way people think. You came into our lives because of family. My brother, Richard, made a terrible mistake when he was young. A mistake that left an innocent child without a home. That child was you. My breath caught. For a moment, the words didn't register, they were just shapes on a page. Then it hit all at once. My mother wasn't my mother. Daniel's hand tightened around mine, steadying me as I read on. We took you in when you were only a few days old. Richard disappeared soon after, and your biological mother didn't want to be found. We promised to raise you as our own, and we did. Every laugh, every bedtime story, every scraped knee, it was all real. But I knew one day the truth would surface, and I wanted you to hear it from me, not from someone angry or careless. You are not a mistake, Ava. You are the best decision I've ever made. The only regret I carry is not telling you myself. I set the letter down, tears blurring the ink. The room felt both smaller and louder, my heartbeat, the hum of the fridge, the weight of every unanswered question pressing in on me. Daniel's voice was barely audible. I found that the night before her funeral. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. And when Richard reached out, I panicked. I thought if I kept you away from him, maybe you could stay in the life she wanted for you. I wiped my face. So you canceled my invite to protect me from my own father? He nodded slowly. Yeah. It didn't make sense at first. None of it did. But underneath the confusion was something I couldn't ignore, a strange, fragile clarity. My whole life had been built on love that was borrowed but never fake. My mother had lied, yes, but she'd done it to give me a life untouched by the mistakes of the generation before us. I stared at the letter again, tracing the indentation of her handwriting with my thumb. She must have known what that truth would do to me, and yet she still trusted I'd forgive her. Daniel whispered, "You okay?" I let out a long, uneven breath. No. But I think I understand her now. For the first time in years, we just sat together without talking, no pretending, no roles, no hiding. Just two siblings, bound by something messier than blood but maybe stronger than it, too. When I finally looked up, Daniel's eyes were red but calm. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I folded the letter carefully back into its envelope. "I think I need to find him," I said quietly. "Not because I need another father. But because I need to know why she forgave him." He nodded, like he'd been expecting that answer all along. And somewhere in the quiet between us, I could almost hear Mom's voice again, soft, steady, certain, telling me that some truths don't destroy families. They rebuild them, piece by piece. I drove for hours before I even turned on the radio. The highway stretched out in front of me, an endless gray ribbon through the hills, and my mind felt just as empty. I had the letter folded in the seat beside me, like a heartbeat I could still hear. Daniel had given me an address, one he'd found buried in an old email thread from Mom's account. A small town outside Denver. Richard lived there now. I didn't know what I was expecting, an apology, a reason, maybe even anger. But mostly, I just needed something real. When I finally pulled into the neighborhood, everything looked ordinary. A dog barking somewhere. Wind in the trees. Kids' bikes leaning against fences. And there, at the end of the street, a small blue house with peeling paint. I sat in the car for 5 full minutes before I could make myself get out. My hands were trembling as I walked up the path. Every step felt like crossing a line between two lives, the one I'd always known and the one that had been waiting underneath it. I knocked. A man opened the door, older now, grayer than I remembered from the few faded photos in our family albums. His eyes widened when he saw me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Ava," like he wasn't sure if I was real. I nodded. My throat was tight. "Yeah. I think we should talk." He stepped aside quietly, letting me in. The house smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust. Simple. Lived in. There were framed photos on the walls, some old, some new, but none of me. We sat at the kitchen table. The same kind of table where Mom used to write letters. He looked down at his hands. "I wanted to reach out years ago," he said softly. "Your mother made me promise not to. She thought keeping distance would keep you safe." "Safe from what?" I asked. "From me," he said simply. He told me everything, the fights with my dad, the mistakes that tore the brothers apart, how he'd gotten mixed up with the wrong people, lost his job, and disappeared before I was even born. When Mom found out about me, she couldn't stand the thought of me ending up in foster care. So she brought me home. "She saved you," he said, his voice breaking. "And in a way, she saved me too." I listened quietly. The pain in his voice wasn't performative, it was raw, the kind that lives inside someone for decades. I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest the whole drive there: "Why didn't you ever come back?" He looked at me then, really looked, and said, "Because she was doing what I couldn't. Being your parent." For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after years of not understanding where you came from. We talked for hours. About Mom, about Daniel, about all the years lost to silence. He showed me a box of letters she'd sent him after she got sick, none signed, all typed. Each one a little piece of her forgiveness. She'd been healing their story quietly, even when we didn't know. When I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "Ava," he said, "I don't expect you to call me family. I just hope someday you'll think of me without hate." I smiled through the tears. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just wish you'd known the woman I got to call Mom." He nodded, eyes wet. "I did. That's why I stayed away. She asked me to." I stepped outside, the air cold against my skin, and for the first time since that planner's message, I didn't feel lost. I felt grounded. Like the truth, heavy as it was, had finally landed somewhere solid. The sky was turning orange when I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. "Well?" he asked, voice cautious. "He's not a monster," I said quietly. "Just a man who made every wrong choice and somehow still loved us." Daniel didn't say anything for a while. Then, softly, Mom would have wanted that answer. We talked the whole drive home. About the wedding, about forgiveness, about starting over. The kind of conversation that stitches something back together, even if the seam always shows. That night, I sat on my porch with the letter in my lap, watching the lights of the city flicker below. I thought about how one cancelled invitation had unraveled my entire world, and how, somehow, that unraveling had stitched me closer to the truth. Mom was right. Love and truth aren't always the same thing. But sometimes, if you're lucky, they meet in the middle, in forgiveness, in family, in the choice to keep showing up. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt invited again, not to a wedding, but back into my own life.